He went to sleep on a Sunday evening in October, and when he woke up the next morning, the woman standing in his kitchen was a stranger. She was making coffee the way his wife always made it. She was wearing his wife's robe. She turned when she heard him in the doorway and smiled at him the way his wife smiled. He felt nothing. No recognition, no warmth, no sense of familiarity at all. He stood in the doorway of his own home and looked at the face of the woman he had been married to for 19 years, and he did not know who she was. He had not had a stroke. He had not lost his memory. He could tell you her name, her birthday, the year they met, the hospital where their children were born. He knew every fact about her. He simply could not see her face. It was the autumn of 2008, and Robert was 44 years old. He worked as a civil engineer in a mid-sized city in the American Midwest. He had built a life that was, by any reasonable measure, stable and full. A wife named Carol, 2 teenage children, a house with a yard, Saturday morning runs, Sunday dinners with the family 2 streets over. He had been healthy his entire adult life. No history of neurological illness, no family history of anything that would have prepared him for what happened the morning after he woke up from what should have been an unremarkable night of sleep. He had gone to bed with a headache. Mild, he thought, the kind that comes from a long week and not enough water. He took 2 aspirin and lay down. He woke 8 hours later, walked to the kitchen, and did not recognize his wife. He said nothing to Carol that morning. He watched her move through the kitchen, listened to her voice, noted the way she laughed at something on the radio. He knew it was her. He had access to every piece of information that confirmed it. But the knowing and the seeing existed in entirely separate places, and they could not find each other. He drove to work. He sat in meetings. He came home. He did not tell anyone for 11 days. When he finally told Carol, he framed it carefully. Something felt off, he said. With his eyes, maybe. He thought he should see a doctor. She agreed. She assumed it was something simple. It was not simple. Their GP referred him to an ophthalmologist. His eyes were examined thoroughly. His vision was normal. His eye movements were normal. His visual processing, as far as standard testing could determine, was intact. The ophthalmologist referred him to a neurologist. The neurologist ordered an MRI. The scan came back with findings that were subtle enough that the first radiologist who reviewed it classified them as within normal variation. It was the second radiologist, working on a re-read requested 3 weeks later, who noted a small area of reduced signal in the right fusiform gyrus, a region of the temporal lobe so specific in its function that damage to it produces one of the most disorienting conditions in all of neurology. Robert was diagnosed with prosopagnosia, face blindness, not an inability to see faces. His visual system worked. He could describe Carol's features accurately, could tell you the color of her eyes and the shape of her mouth. What he could not do was integrate those features into a unified, recognizable whole. The part of his brain responsible for reading a face as a face, for producing the instant, effortless recognition that most people experience without ever thinking about it, had been disrupted. The overnight headache had been a small vascular event, contained, survivable, located by a margin that seemed almost incomprehensibly precise in the exact region of the brain that makes one human face distinguishable from another. He could not recognize his wife. He could not recognize his children. He could not recognize himself in a mirror without a deliberate act of reasoning. That is me because that is my bathroom, and I am the only person in it. He learned to identify people by other means. Carol's voice, the way she walked, a particular cardigan she wore on cold mornings that he had asked her to keep wearing because it helped, his children's heights, their shoes, the sound of their footsteps on the stairs. The neurologist who gave him the diagnosis sat across from him and explained the mechanism carefully. The fusiform face area, the way it processes holistic facial recognition separately from other kinds of visual identification, the way a small disruption in blood flow could permanently alter its function without touching anything else. Robert listened to all of it, and then he asked the one question that had been sitting with him since the morning he stood in the kitchen doorway. He said, "Will I ever see her face again, the way I used to?" The neurologist was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Not in the way you mean, but you will know her. In every way that matters, you will know her. Robert went home. Carol was in the kitchen. She was wearing the cardigan. He walked in and said her name, and she turned, and he knew exactly who she was. He just could not see it. Prosopagnosia affects an estimated 2 to 3% of the population in some form, most of them born with it, never having known a different way of seeing. Robert's acquired form, prosopagnosia resulting from a discrete neurological event in adulthood, is rarer. It carries a particular weight that congenital cases do not, because he knew what he had lost. He remembered what Carol's face had looked like to him before that Sunday night. The instant, automatic, unremarkable recognition that he had never once thought to value, because it had always been there. He spent the years after the diagnosis building a new vocabulary for the people he loved. Their voices, their movements, their habits, the specific textures of their presence in a room. He became, by necessity, an expert in everything about a person except their face. He gave talks at medical schools. He connected with researchers studying prosopagnosia and the neural architecture of facial recognition. He wanted people to understand what the condition actually felt like from the inside. Not as a curiosity, not as an edge case, but as a life that had to be rebuilt around a single invisible absence. He was asked in one of those talks what the hardest moment of each day was. He said it was the morning. Every morning, walking into the kitchen and needing to think his way to his wife instead of simply seeing her. The rest of the day, he said, he managed. But that first moment, that was the one that never stopped costing him something.